Good morning. Good morning. I'm Rebecca Sparks, a faculty member here at AUK. Before we begin today's conference, let's take a moment of silence for the brave men and women of the Peshmerga, both living and martyred, and for the founding father of Kurdistan, Mustafa Barzani. Please stand. Please be seated. Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, welcome to the American University of Kurdistan. Our topic, Independence of Kurdistan, Challenges and Opportunities, is an important one made all the more relevant by the rapidly changing political landscape of the Middle East. We are honored to have with us today many of the world's leading experts on Kurdish and Middle East issues to discuss Kurdish self-determination and the regional and global implications of an independent Kurdish state. Now I'd like to introduce and welcome the first president of the American University of Kurdistan, Dr. Michael Mulnix. In addition to a keen business mind, Dr. Mulnix has brought to the university a commitment to academic inquiry, freedom of expression, and the open exchange of ideas that make this university a fitting place to have this discussion. Please welcome Dr. Mulnix.
Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Chairman of the Board of Trustees, KRG ministers, Mr. Governor, all mayors, consulate generals, party leaders, members of parliament, members of the AUK Board of Trustees, the U.S. Kurdish Business Council, university presidents, scholars, authors, AUK faculty, staff, and students, and all other esteemed guests and friends. Welcome. I am honored to be standing here before you today as the founding president of the American University of Kurdistan and to welcome you to the first annual conference on the independence of Kurdistan, Challenges and Opportunities. Many of you have visited AUK before, but if this is your first time, welcome. We're honored to have you on our beautiful campus and welcome you to what is fast developing into a superior institution of higher learning, one that is gaining respect throughout the nation and the region. I've only lived in Kurdistan for about a year and a half, and during that time have become a student of the political and social process that appears to be leading toward an independent nation. Over the course of the next 2 days, I'm anxious to hear those of you who will advocate for an immediate separation of the Kurdish and Iraqi nations, as well as the counter-arguments of those who will caution against such a move. In the United States, we recently witnessed at times quite extreme arguments in favor of and opposed to candidates for the presidency. At times, the debate was so heated, it appeared the nation would be torn apart. The election resulted in deep divisions, creating a real dichotomy ranging from mistrust bordering on fear at one extreme to jubilation on the other. Regardless of how Americans feel about the election of Donald Trump as president, one thing remains certain. The United States will remain an independent, self-governing and sovereign nation. Now, how the Trump presidency would relate to an independent, self-governing, and sovereign Kurdistan remains to be seen and may not be known for several years or even quite a bit longer. Without question, many knowledgeable individuals in Kurdistan were not particularly enchanted with the Obama presidency, particularly in the area of foreign relations, and they welcome a change. But change, as we know, can be a very good thing. However, change can also bring unpleasant and unexpected consequences. The theme of this conference relates directly to that uncertainty, both the challenges and the opportunities that a referendum on independence would bring. Many here today will be deeply divided on the issue of Kurdish independence. I'm sure we'll hear passionate arguments both pro and con. It's entirely appropriate that such a free and open debate take place on a university campus such as this. One of the cornerstones of the American University of Kurdistan is to establish a climate of open and free debate, to empower our students to act as responsible citizens, but also to effect social, political, and environmental change within a global context. At AUK, we promote a spirit of inquiry in our ultimate goal of creating a multicultural, intergenerational, and accessible institution of higher learning that nurtures an innovative, reflective, and experiential approach to higher education. At AUK, we ask that our students increase their understanding and acceptance of the cultures, traditions, religions, politics, and languages of all parts of the world. We encourage our students to be multicultural and tolerant of all races, creeds, and political affiliations. Open debate in forums such as this, where a variety of different opinions will be expressed and welcomed, is a key element of the inclusive style of education we nurture at this institution. By listening to the scholars, politicians, authors, and academics at conferences like this, our students will become increasingly skilled in critical thinking and will come to understand the importance of creative and independent thought. Our students will begin to think globally as citizens of the world. It is with a spirit of optimism that I welcome each and every one of you to this timely and important conference. As a guest to this country, I look forward to learning a great deal about the opportunities and challenges of developing an independent Kurdish nation. Before I introduce our first speaker, let me give heartfelt thanks to several individuals who worked overtime to ensure the success of this event. Dr. Honar Isa, the AUK Provost, Mr. Delavan Barwari, representing the Chairman's Office, Mr. Jamal Ahmed, Manager of Campus Services, Nuha Sarek, Manager of PR and Marketing, and Dr. Rania Majid, Chairwoman of the AUK Foundation. My thanks to you and to all of the other AUK faculty, staff, and students who made this event possible. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, my boss, the Chairman of the AUK Board of Trustees, His Excellency Masroor Barzani, an honors graduate in international studies from the American University of Washington, D.C., a member of the Kurdistan Democratic Party, and Chancellor of the Kurdistan Region Security Council. As related to the theme of this conference, it is interesting and important to note that as recently as May of 2016, Mr. Barzani authored a well-read and widely circulated op-ed in the Washington Post that advocated an amicable separation of Iraqi Kurdistan from the rest of Iraq. In that opinion piece, he called Iraq, quote, a conceptual failure, compelling peoples with little in common to share an uncertain future. He then announced the beginning of talks with the Iraqi government in the lead-up to a referendum. Please join me in welcoming the Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the American University of Kurdistan, His Excellency Masroor Barzani.
Good morning, everyone. بانی باش بخیراتنی که گرمی عمولکتان در کم زور زور بخیر بین خوشحالین به آمده بونتان. Thank you, Michael, Mr. Prime Minister, party leaders, ministers, ambassadors, members of the Parliament, and also my friends on the university's Board of Trustees and academic faculty, and journalists, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome you to our inaugural conference on the future independence of Kurdistan. I would like to say what a proud, exciting, and indeed momentous occasion this is for me personally, especially that we are gathered in this hall, a hall that stands in honor of my grandfather, that foremost historic champion of our country's independence. This is firstly and primarily, of course, because of the aim and subject matter of this conference, after all, which sets out to provide a political and academic assessment of the opportunities and challenges associated with the increasing self-rule of our country. As the war against Daesh grinds on, and given the continuing failure of the Iraqi state to provide effective governance, it is right and proper that all of us in Kurdistan should take stock of our own achievements, famously on the battlefield, but equally, gloriously within our emerging civil society, and look toward the future in which we exercise formally and completely our right as a sovereign people of self-determination. Without it, the future remains uncertain, beset by collusion of regional powers and an international system designed to protect sovereign states and not nations. Many of us here today carry bitter stories of our horrific past under successive regimes in Iraq and beyond, as the world simply looked on. We are all touched by unimaginable stories of hardship, loss, and betrayal. As I have often said in the past, our independence from Iraq should be welcomed as a solution to addressing distrust, a problem that has plagued Iraq for much of the last century. We are not accepted as equal citizens, and we reject subordination. Trust between and recently among Iraq's ethnic and religious communities does not exist. The path forward must be underpinned by a realistic dialogue between the Kurdish leadership and moderate forces in Baghdad for a mechanism to shape our future relations based on good neighborly ties and mutual interests. Yet my own views and feelings on this subject are reasonably well known and not intended to be the focus of this opening remarks. I am principally here today as an appreciative and attentive listener and a host, rather than a polemicist in the political debate. But I am equally proud, secondly, because of the very nature and format of the discussions we are about to engage in, which will remain emphatically scholarly in tone and content, evidence-based, rooted in a deep understanding of the complex history of our people and region, and founded on mutual tolerance and respect among all participants. In this, I'm confident that our discussion, our search for the best path for our people and for this part of the world will embody the fundamental values of our American university, values that are epitomized in the lives of the people of Kurdistan and, of course, of the Hook, who are currently striving their hardest to look after several hundreds of thousands of refugees and displaced individuals, values that are proactively protected by our President, by the Kurdistan regional government, and indeed by the very lives of our Peshmerga. Outward-looking liberal values at which Kurdistan is firmly aligned. This is why, looking around this audience and surveying the list of speakers that the president of our university, Dr. Molnix, and his team have assembled here, and thank you, every one of you, for making yourself available to join us. I am especially pleased to see such a diverse as well as such a distinguished body of panelists and guests who have agreed to participate. There are those of us who are members of one political party, and there are those among us from other parties and groupings. I see academics who have enthusiastically endorsed the idea of Kurdish independence, and there are other scholars who have tended to be more skeptical, and there are representatives of governments that hold constraining views about the best future shape of this part of the world, even as our complex situation evolves. And do remember that the fight against ISIS in Mosul and elsewhere is ongoing. There are learned visitors from all parts of the world and all parts of the Kurdish diaspora. And it is this diversity of viewpoint that will be a fundamental core strong component in our discussion. For as Winston Churchill reminds us, it is by putting the best minds in one place through lively debate and discussion, and by pushing around of ideas, rather than through dogged adherence to a single political mantra, that the best and most lasting solutions are reached. In this case, solutions that will offer a true roadmap forward for the future of our country. I very much look forward to seeing some core outcomes and ideas emerge and be refined over the coming sessions. Finally, I should like to thank most sincerely those members of the academic faculty, chairwomen, and members of the Board of Trustees of the American University of Kurdistan Foundation and University Administration who have contributed to the organization of this event, both the logistics themselves and, most importantly, for putting together such an eminent guest list of speakers. The university here in The Hague is now only 1 year old, and what you have achieved in this time in building a credible academic institution with a growing international pedigree and reputation and providing first-class education for so many students is deeply impressive. It is, in fact, I believe, indicative of the possible scale of many more future life-enhancing achievements and successes that we'll be able to build together in an independent Kurdistan. Once again, thank you very much for attending and coming to this gathering. Thank you so much.
And now, let's welcome Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, member of the AUK Board of Trustees.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, my friend, the former Foreign Minister, Finance Minister, other members of the Cabinet, members of Parliament. I see some Peshmerga leaders, other distinguished Kurds and foreigners. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today with you. I want to congratulate Mr. Masroor Barzani for his initiative to lead the establishment of the American University of Kurdistan. I am a strong supporter myself of American universities overseas. I am a proud graduate of one of those universities, the American University of Beirut. My wife, Cheryl, is here, and in fact, I met her on the campus of the American University in Beirut. So I'm delighted to be a member of the board of this university We had our board meeting yesterday. I was very impressed. This was my first board meeting about the progress that the university is making. So I want to congratulate the chairman, the president of the university who's here, thank you, and all others who are contributing. I was most impressed to see so many Kurdish business leaders associated with the foundation in support of the university to participate, to help. Because in doing so, not only they are helping the university, not only helping the students, the graduates, future graduates, but also they're helping themselves, because these graduates will have the skills to become great employees of these companies, to make them more efficient, to make them more prosperous, more effective, more successful in their enterprises. So I congratulate you for your wisdom to support the university. The topic of the discussion today, independence of Kurdistan, or independence for Kurdistan, it is an important and a timely topic to discuss and debate. Important because, as Mr. Barzani said, the future of the region, and I mean not the region of Kurdistan, but the region as a whole, is very much on everyone's mind in the world. Given the terrible civil war in Syria, given the threat of terrorism, Daesh, and I applaud and salute the bravery of the Peshmerga that have taken on behalf of not only the Kurds, but the whole world, the struggle against Daesh. There is an issue of what happens after the defeat of Daesh. We know the war is going on, but the outcome is clear. Ultimately, Mosul will be liberated, and Daesh will be defeated in Iraq. Then what happens? What's to be done? There are Iraqis, I follow the situation in Iraq closely, who are talking about maybe a historic opportunity for a new beginning. There are countries around the world, including my own, where we have a new leadership coming to power, which inevitably will review the policies that the US has been following and what it should do going forward. There is also the possibility of new initiatives having to do with what should be prioritized in terms of US policy, international policy, whether there should be a new discussion about the future of this region among great powers. Should the defeat of extremism and terror remain the preeminent US or international goal? Should deterring and defeating efforts at regional hegemony become an equally important priority? How should the international community relate to governance issues and organizations of states in this region? How active should the international community, or in the case of the United States, the US, be with regard to governance issues? And there are new threats that are emerging. I have also heard from some forces in Iraq who are talking about, after Daesh, the Kurds may be the challenge or the threat that they must address. So in the face of these discussions that will take place in Iraq and around the world, it's important for the Kurds to have a say, to have a perspective, to have a view of their own, to contribute, to inform, to shape the discussions that are inevitably going to take place. So I applaud the university, the chairman, the president, and others for deciding to hold this discussion at this time. I know that the Kurds, who I've gotten to know for the past decade or more, have had a long yearning for statehood, for independence of their own. I know that the Kurds are a distinct people, like all peoples, with the right of self-determination. But because of developments far away from here at times, because of developments close by at times, because of some internal issues, the issue of independence has not achieved the status that many Kurds, I think the overwhelming majority of Kurds of Iraq, aspire to, desire, hope for, and pray for. So that much is clear. The question is, and it's very fitting that this is a discussion, the topic is being discussed on a university campus, is this the time? Is this the time for Kurds to reach for that aspiration that has been there? And this is a big decision. It's not a simple decision. It's not a casual decision. It's a big decision. It's an important decision. I dare say it's a vital decision for the Kurds, especially, and maybe for the rest of Iraq. And it's important for the world because what happens in this region affects the world. So the world has a stake also in this. And so therefore, it's important to be deliberate and to deliberate. I know that ideally, for independence to be pursued as an urgent goal, there should be a consensus among the Kurds. Ideally, there should be an agreement between the Kurds and the Iraqis. Ideally, there should be an agreement among all neighbors. Ideally, there should be an international consensus that this is a positive and good thing to happen. Ideally, there should be a detailed plan for how, when independence should be exercised or achieved. I dare say that if the discussion and debate would show that the ideal circumstances are not in place. But I also would like to say, and I hope this will be debated, that most countries have become independent not under ideal circumstances. If all countries that have become independent had waited for ideal circumstances, there would be very few countries in the world. There would be maybe a few empires. So the challenge is, and the challenge that the Kurds, in particular the Kurds of Iraq, must focus on, must decide on, and the world should hear from them about, not what all that ideally should be in place, but what the necessary conditions are for them, for the exercise of this option. In other words, among all the factors that I mentioned, consensus among the Kurds of Iraq I call upon all the Kurds of Iraq, and you know that I feel very strongly and positively about you, is to rise to the occasion, recognize the importance of this issue, and put little games aside and focus on the big and vital issue of independence. Because the eyes of the world will be on you if you start this process. Sometimes great people rise to the occasion and achieve great things, even in desperate and difficult circumstances. I think of my own country, the United States, where there were periods of extreme pessimism. After the Declaration of Independence, by the way, as Peter, who's sitting in the front row, reminds me every now and then when we talk, at the time that the US declared its independence, perhaps only a third of the American establishment were supportive of independence. Some were working with the occupying power, with the empire. There was great pessimism about whether this nation would survive. There were serious differences of view. Then there was great pessimism in the 20th century with depression, World War. But then we have a generation of Americans called the greatest generation, who not only brought America out of a terrible recession, but then led America to victory in World War II. So, I know that there are political differences among the Kurdish leaders. That's inevitable, especially if you have democracy. Especially if you live in a neighborhood where regional powers use local political forces for their own agendas. Resources are involved. Threats are involved. But the test of leadership is when the time is critical, when a big decision is to be made, can you overcome and rise to the occasion to make the right decision? And you don't need unanimity. You don't need consensus. You can have a debate. In fact, the debate is good. But when the decision is made, will you do the right thing? Will you keep the interest of Kurdistan at heart? Or will it be the instructions, the guidance, the manipulation, the grand strategies, the little strategies of others that would guide you? I plead with you, as your friend, do not make the mistake of falling into the second trap. For you will be accountable not only to the current generations of Kurds, who will hold you accountable, but to the generations yet to be born. Because the history of the Kurds, there are good periods, but there are tragic periods. Tragic for betrayals, for stabbing each other in the back. Lessons must be learned. Lessons must be learned. So, I would like to suggest the time is right for this debate to occur, for a decision to be deliberated on, for an input to be made by the Kurds as the rest of the world discusses what to do about this region, to inform, as I said before, to advise, to suggest, to make history rather than be the subject of decisions made by others. And I hope that you can identify not the ideal conditions. We can say from get-go the ideal conditions do not exist, and I dare say the ideal conditions aren't going to be in place if you wait 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If there are people in this audience, in the debate, that would say, now is not good, but in 3 years it'll be better, this is a debate worth having. Why? In 1 or 2 or 3 years, things could get better. One other thing I would like the deliberations to focus on, and that is being realistic. At times, opportunities have been lost, perhaps here, but certainly in other places, where the search or the demand or the desire to achieve the maximum has precluded, has prevented the achievement of what perhaps would have been sufficient for that time as a first major step. I think of the Palestinians, for example. The acceptance of a two-state solution in 1948 would have been very favorable in retrospect for the Palestinian position. As time has went on, what has been available and what has been demanded has gotten worse. Now, I know there are issues with regard to a possible agreement between Kurdistan and Iraq, which would be the best outcome if there is an agreement on whatever steps you take. That would be, I think, quite desirable. Maybe thinking practically, pragmatically, realistically. And what that should be would be a good thing, a good issue for discussion and debate here. I think some of the people I've talked to in the last couple of days, senior Kurds, have thought about this issue. And I think they have, I'm encouraged by the practicality or pragmatic thinking of those people. Last point, before I say a word about President Barzani, is it's important that whatever decision is made at the end of the day, that every effort is made to plan and strategize and timeline to the maximum extent possible what you will do. Be prepared based on good planning, thinking, and strategies, and game the different scenarios based on not only internal reactions, not only on Iraqi reactions, but more broadly, what regional reactions and beyond would be. Lastly, this is a personal note on my part. I hope it's taken the right way. And that is that there is a leader now in Kurdistan, a person of stature who has devoted his life to the cause of the Kurds, who's led the Kurds in battle, in political discussions, and I've been a witness to the political discussions during my time in Baghdad on the Constitution, among other things. And whose life mission has been to achieve the goal of Kurdish self-determination. That's an asset. That's an asset. Think about that as well as you deliberate. I appreciate the opportunity to be asked. I know this conversation should be among Kurds. Kurds should be talking about this, debating, arguing. Putting various ideas forward on a whole set of issues. To be asked, I feel greatly honored to be asked to say something about this to a mostly Kurdish audience. I feel humbled by it. I hope I've not violated any, I'm a private citizen, I hope I've not violated any diplomatic norms, although even when I was a diplomat, but I do feel honored to have been asked to contribute. So I thank the chairman, thank the president. I wish my friends and the Kurds all the very best as they deliberate. They should know they have friends besides the mountains. They have friends as well. And you're facing a grand moment of opportunity. Sure, there will be risk. No big decision involves no risk. If they were simple and easy and risk it would have been done a long time ago. But it may fall on this generation of Kurds once again to make a big decision for themselves. So I wish you well. I pray for your success, and you can count on my support and help under all circumstances. Thank you very much.